say welcome tonight to our guests, Matt Stadlen and Esther Craku. Hello. We are going to take a look at some of those front pages. We'll start with that striking image, shall we, on the front page of The Observer. The huge protests, peaceful protests in support of Palestine action that took place in Westminster. It says 400 arrested, but that number's actually gone up. Metropolitan Police confirming tonight 470 people arrested, Matt. That's the most arrests since the poll tax riots back in 1990. It's a huge number.
It's an extraordinary number, and I'm sure you will have government ministers this evening wondering whether it was, in the end, the right decision to prescribe this group, Palestine Action, as a terrorist organisation. And we're led to believe that ministers and officials were pondering whether or not to do this for about 8 months. So this decision was not reached lightly.
And it was only reached last month.
Indeed. And to see people apparently protesting peacefully, but with placards, many of which will have shown support for a prescribed terrorist organisation. But to see these people in the cradle of British democracy outside the Houses of Parliament, then facing arrest, is a striking image. I think it's a brilliant headline. As you say, it's now more than 400 people arrested, 470. And just to be clear, the arrests don't mean that these people have committed acts of terror, but they have, the argument would go, and it will be tested no doubt in the courts, they have committed criminal offences if they have shown support for a terrorist organisation. Now, many of these people, I'm sure, will argue that they are exercising their free speech, and they would be wrong, because you cannot, as I've just said, express support for a terrorist organisation. But it is a really interesting area, this, because I believe that Palestine Action is the first organisation that isn't committed to violence against individuals, against human beings, does commit criminal damage, that is being prescribed as a terrorist organisation, therefore lumped together with Hamas, with Nazi organisations and so forth.
Esther, it's interesting. Gurpreet Nawar, our correspondent, was at that protest today, and she was talking to people about why they were there to protest, and talking to them about the fact that they faced arrest. As Matt said, just by supporting Palestine Action, you could face 14 years in prison. They were all well aware of that fact, but determined to turn up today for images, other images they see on Sky News. What is happening in Gaza, to them, it's worth that risk.
Yes, and I think what the British government has done is incentivise them to make a stand and to make a point. This is where sort of intention meets the reality of the capabilities of the British state, which is that obviously it's highly likely none of these 470 people that have been arrested will see prison time, because at any given moment in British prisons, and this has been the case for the last 15 odd years, there are not more than 100 prison spaces. So they're not going to face the severe penalties and nothing like the 14-year maximum penalty. But to see these striking images of these protesters, some of them very elderly, being hauled off by the police like sacks of wheat, that's what they want. They're making a statement. And obviously, like Matt said, this will be tested in the courts to see whether what they're actually doing is illegal. But again, this begs the question, even though this wasn't a decision taken lightly or quickly, was this the best way to handle it? They're not on par with Hamas or Al-Qaeda. They don't have the kind of external links that a traditional terrorist organisation would. And actually, in many ways, doing this has only emboldened them and worsened the case. It's kind of like trying to discipline children. The worst thing to do is to tell them not to do something, because you make them want to do it more. And
one of the interesting things, I think, is that there were obviously already criminal offences in place that people could have been tried under if they were to have done something like break into an airport where British military planes might fly off to the region. And so was this the right sort of law to bring in? I mean, I have a close friend who was on this very protest, and he was protesting not in support of Palestine Action, which, like me, he does not support, but he was protesting against its proscription. In other words, protesting that the government has got it wrong, even though he doesn't back the means of this organisation.
Yeah, many people there feeling that the UK is overreacting. Let's look at the story inside The Observer. The headline there, as hundreds committed the offence of putting ink to cardboard, police moved in, which is a powerful line. It's worth reminding people, you know, it's estimated that since 2020, when Palestine Action was formed, more than 385 direct actions against firms it links to Israel's military have occurred. It was an incident at RF Bryce Norton involving aircraft that was a final straw for the Home Secretary, and she proscribed the organisation. For many people there today, Palestine Action, for them, it's about activism, not terrorism. But the Home Secretary, Matt, it's interesting, has said, you know, we have intelligence that proves otherwise, essentially.
You have to hope, because you want the government of the day to get things right, that they knew what they were doing, and that they felt that this sort of thing was worth the risk to try to discourage people from actually committing the acts of terror, because that is presumably the primary concern. Interestingly, Hamza Yusuf, who until not that long ago was literally the First Minister of Scotland, has posted on X about this and said that if people were being arrested for waving placards in countries such as China or Russia, the British media would be up in arms about that, or the Brits would be up in arms about that. So what are we doing in this country arresting people for placards?
Oh, it's interesting. The government decision to prescribe Palestine Action is heading to the High Court in November for a full review, which could cause chaos when you look at the number of arrests and, you know, if any charges are brought. Let's move on to the Sunday Express. Riot police on alert as more protests are planned. We move from the protests at Westminster to the wave of protests across the country, Esther, about migrants being, asylum seekers being housed in hotels.